Good evening. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday afternoon. Hopefully you were able to join us this morning in person, or if not, maybe you were able to catch our services online. Hopefully, the main thing is you got your worship in today and give God what He was due. And keep in mind also that if you did miss that, you can go back and watch those videos on our Facebook page and continue to share those with your friends and family. Also, continue to remind you about our Wednesday night services. Louis is still teaching the class in the auditorium. Somewhere around March the 1st, we'll be making a switch probably. So that's upcoming. And we're finishing up the studies that Stuart and Carla and the rest had been working with the teen classes, and then Richie will be transitioning in. We got a lot of things in the plans for this year coming up, and we're anxious to see things getting back to normal and getting back to people saying, "What's Rivergate doing?" and sharing all that stuff on our Facebook page. So some good things coming up, I'm certain, and we're looking forward to all that, and we'd love to have you to be involved with that. Now, as for the message for this evening, I don't know if you're like me. I was a fan of Gilligan's Island when I was a kid. I used to watch that show quite a bit. Had a sermon a couple of years ago when our VBS, it was some kind of a shipwrecked thing or something, and I had a sermon called The 3-Hour Tour. But I was looking at some interesting things from history, and it reminded me of an episode of Gilligan's Island. I don't remember exactly how this went, but they had come upon a guy that was living there. Of course, they were shipwrecked on the island, if you remember how that went. And they came upon a Japanese soldier that had been there since World War II. And he thought they were the enemy because he'd been trapped on that island, and he didn't realize that the war was over. Well, interestingly enough, and it's highly likely that story may have come from this, but that was an actual event like that actually happened. It was on this day, in January 24th of 1972. This is how the story goes. After 28 years of hiding in the jungles of Guam, local farmers discovered Soshi Yokoi, a Japanese sergeant who fought in World War II. Guam, a 200 square mile island in the Western Pacific, became a U.S. possession in 1898 after the Spanish-American War. Then in 1941, the Japanese attacked and captured it. And then in 1944, after 3 years of Japanese occupation, U.S. forces retook Guam. It was at this time that Yokoi was left behind by the retreating Japanese forces and went into hiding rather than surrender to the Americans. In the jungles of Guam, he carved survival tools, and for the next 3 decades waited for the return of the Japanese in his next orders. After he was discovered in 1972, he was finally discharged and sent home to Japan, where he was hailed as a national hero. He subsequently married and returned to Guam for his honeymoon. His handcrafted survival tools and threadbare uniform are on display in the Guam Museum in Agana. Now, to me, that's an amazing story of perseverance, if you will, and the human will and dedication. To me, when I think about this, I think how amazing it would be if only we could get people to be as dedicated to the Lord as that, just willing to, above all things, to remain faithful and to be dedicated. Now, I'm certainly thankful for those people that have served this great country, and I'm thankful for that. But, sometimes it's almost like it's more easy to get people to be faithful to their country than it is to get people to be faithful and obedient to God. If we could get people to be faithful on the level of this man, that for 3 decades he was faithful in the face of everything else, we would be so much better off, spiritually speaking. It's not always going to be an easy path, just like for that man that was trapped on that island. It's going to be a difficult and lonely path at times. Jesus makes that clear in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14, where he tells us that it's a difficult way, a narrow road that leads to salvation, and there are few who find it. So that tells me that just like that man, there's going to be times when it's going to be hard and it's going to be lonely, and we're going to see the multitude that's going off and doing something else. How much easier, you think about that man hiding on that island, how much easier would it have been for him to just surrender? And probably he wouldn't have even faced repercussions maybe from the U.S. government. Probably would have been allowed to just go about his business, but he didn't want to forsake the thing that he stood for, the thing that he was remaining faithful to. So a difficult road. It's going to be hard at times. There's going to be persecutions. Just like this man probably feeling that he was being persecuted by being left there and being basically in the hands of the enemy, though he was in hiding all that time. Sometimes that's the way it is as a Christian. In Matthew chapter 10 and verse 22, Jesus said, "And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved." And on that thought, that's what I want us to close out on. Jesus says it's the one that endures to the end. In Revelation chapter 2 and verse 10, the Bible talks about a time of persecution when people are going to be tried and tested. But it closes that verse by telling us that it's the one that is faithful until death that's going to receive the crown of life. Just pray that you take this thought with you as you go into your week, as you go into the rest of this year, the rest of your life. Think about what you're willing to give and how you're willing to sacrifice and what you would be willing to endure to have your home in heaven with God one day, because from my standpoint, whatever it is that we face here, it's going to be worth it when we have that home in the end. I want to thank you once again for tuning in, and I pray that you have a blessed week.